There are a couple of skills that really need to be mastered before we go any further with fractions, and those two skills are finding the greatest common factor and finding the least common multiple. So a factor is another name for a divisor, and one way to find the greatest common factor is just simply to list all the factors. So if we're looking for the greatest common factor of 12 and 16, we can list all the factors of 12, list all the factors of 16, and look for the greatest common factor. And one way to list factors is to do it in pairs, so that the pairs multiply to give you the number in question. So we can do the pairs 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. Those are all the factors of 12. And then let's do it again for 16. 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and 4 times 4. Now, they both obviously have the factor 1. That's considered a trivial factor. Every pair of numbers is going to have 1 as a common factor, and so we ignore that. What's the next highest? Well, they both have a 2, but it's not the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor in this case is 4. So we would say the GCF, or greatest common factor, of 12 and 16 is 4. Let's try it again for 36 and 60. We'll list the factors in pairs. 1 times 36, 2 times 18, 3 times 12, 4 times 9, 6 times 6. Those are all the factors of 36. 60, 1 times 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 20, 4 times 15, 5 times 12, and 6 times 10. So what's the greatest common factor? They both have a 2, they both have a 3, they both have a 4, they both have a 6, but we can go higher than that. 12 is the greatest common factor of 36 and 60. So the GCF of 36 and 60 is 12. Now, it's nice to be able to do this technique where you list all the factors, but it's probably a bit time consuming for most purposes. You want to practice this so that you can take any two numbers and quickly identify the GCF. It just takes a little bit of practice. Finding the least common multiple. There's actually a relationship between finding the greatest common factor and finding the least common multiple, which we will see quite quickly. How do we find the least common multiple of two numbers? Let's say 3 and 5. Well, one way, probably the way that you first learned when you learned this in elementary school, was just simply to list all the multiples and then look for the lowest common multiple or least common multiple. So multiples of 3 are 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, etc. Multiples of 5 are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. Now we really didn't need to list all of these. As soon as we found a common multiple, we could have stopped. And you can see that the lowest or least common multiple is 15 right there. So the LCM, we say, is 15. Let's try it again for 8 and 12. Well, let's list the multiples of 8. 8, 16, 24. Looking ahead, you realize you probably don't need to go any further than that because 24 is also a multiple of 12. And we don't even need to write the next one, 36. So what's the relationship between finding a least common multiple and finding a greatest common factor? Well, it turns out there is another way to find the least common multiple, and it hinges on first identifying the greatest common factor. 8 and 12 have a GCF of 4. So if I write 8 as 2 times 4, and I write 12 as 3 times 4, I can see my GCF right there. To find the least common multiple, I just simply take all of those factors, but I don't need to repeat the 4 because 4 is a common factor. So the least common multiple is going to have 2 as a factor, 3 as a factor, and also 4. 2 times 3 times 4 is 24. Did that work for the previous one, 3 and 5? Well, 3 and 5 don't have any common factors, or another way of saying that is that the greatest common factor is 1. If that's true, then the lowest common multiple is just simply the product of the two numbers, and 3 times 5 is 15. So let's try this technique for 15 and 20. The GCF is 5, so we can write 15 as 3 times 5, and we can write 20 as 4 times 5. So there's your GCF. The lowest common multiple just simply has all of those factors. 3 times 4 times 5. So 3 times 4 is 12, 12 times 5 is 60. The least common multiple of 15 and 20 is therefore 60. We'll try one more time. 21 and 35 have a GCF of 7. So this is 3 times 7. And this is 5 times 7. There's your GCF. The LCM, least common multiple, is going to have all of those factors. 3 times 5 times 7. 3 times 5 is 15. 15 times 7 is 105. This just takes a little bit of practice, so give it a try.